If you've been feeling a bit off lately, like you're not quite yourself, this might explain why. You go through your day, you do what you need to do, but something feels different. You're not as focused, not as motivated, not as clear. Things that used to feel easy now take more effort, and it's hard to explain exactly what's changed. You just don't feel like yourself anymore. So you start to question it. You wonder if something's wrong, if you've lost your drive, if you've changed somehow. But what if that's not actually what's happening? Because feeling like you've lost yourself is often a result of something much simpler. Mental overload, when your brain is constantly busy, constantly processing, constantly reacting, it doesn't have the space to reflect, to think clearly, to feel grounded. And without that space, you start to feel disconnected, not from everything, but from yourself, because your attention is always somewhere else, on what needs to be done, on what's coming next, on what you haven't done yet. So you're always slightly ahead or slightly behind, but never fully present. And when you're not present, you lose that sense of clarity, that sense of direction, that feeling of being in control. Everything starts to feel a bit blurred, a bit uncertain, and over time, that creates a kind of internal disconnect. You're still functioning, still getting through the day, but you don't feel fully engaged in it. And that's what makes it so frustrating. Because from the outside, everything might look fine, but internally, something feels off. And most people try to fix that the wrong way. They try to do more, push harder, be more productive, get back on track. But that just adds more pressure, more noise, more mental load, which is exactly what caused the problem in the first place. So instead of feeling better, you feel worse, more overwhelmed, more disconnected, because you're trying to fix overload with more input, more effort, more thinking, and that doesn't work. Because the problem isn't that you've lost yourself, it's that you've lost space, space to think, space to reflect, space to actually process what's going on. And without that space, your mind never settles. It just keeps moving from one thing to the next without ever stopping. And when that happens, like you lose that sense of clarity, that feeling of knowing what you want, what you're doing, where you're going. Everything feels a bit uncertain. And that uncertainty creates doubt. You start second guessing yourself, your decisions, your direction, even things you were once confident about. Not because you've changed, but because your mind hasn't had time to catch up. That's why one of the most important things you can do is slow things down. Not everything, just your input. Reduce the noise. Create moments where you're not consuming anything. No phone, no distractions, no constant stimulation, just space. Because in that space, your mind starts to reset. It starts to organize itself. Thoughts become clearer. Things start to make more sense. And that feeling of being off begins to fade. Not instantly, but gradually. Because clarity isn't something you force. It's something that returns when your mind isn't overloaded. Another reason you might feel like this is because you've been running on autopilot, doing the same things, following the same routines without really thinking about them. And over time, that creates distance between what you're doing and how you actually feel about it. You're moving, but without direction, acting without intention. And that's another way people lose that sense of self, not because they've changed, but because they haven't checked in with themselves. They've just kept going. So everything starts to feel automatic, repetitive, unclear, and that adds to the disconnect. That's why slowing down matters. Not to stop, but to notice, to become aware again, to reconnect with what you're doing and why you're doing it. Because once you do that, things start to feel different. You feel more present, more focused, more aligned, and that feeling of being off starts to fade. So if you've been feeling like you're not yourself lately, it's probably not because you've lost who you are. It's because your mind hasn't had the space to reconnect with it. And once you give it that space, things start to come back.